HMS Foxhound was one of 9 F-class destroyers built for the Royal Navy in the mid-1930s. Although she was assigned to the Home Fleet, the ship was detached as part of the Mediterranean Fleet to enforce the arms blockade imposed by Britain and France on both sides during the Spanish Civil War of 1936–39. Several weeks after the start of the Second World War in September 1939, Foxhound helped to sink a German submarine and participated in the Second Battle of Narvik during the Norwegian Campaign of April to June 1940. The ship was sent to Gibraltar in mid-1940 and formed part of Force H, where she participated in the attack on Mers-el-Kébir. Foxhound escorted the aircraft carriers of Force H as they flew off aircraft for Malta and covered convoys resupplying and reinforcing the island, until late 1941. During this time the ship helped to sink another German submarine. In December, she was briefly transferred to the Mediterranean Fleet, where she escorted several convoys to Malta from the Eastern Mediterranean. Foxhound was transferred to the Eastern Fleet in early 1942 and was then assigned to convoy escort duties off South Africa and then in West Africa, until mid-1943 when she was converted into an escort destroyer. When the conversion was completed in early 1944, the ship was transferred to the Royal Canadian Navy and renamed HMS Capel. She was assigned escort duties in the western approaches for several months before the ship was transferred to the English Channel to protect convoys during the Normandy landings. Capel engaged German surface ships several times before she was sent to Iceland for more convoy escort work in October. The ship received a lengthy refit in Canada at the end of the year that was not completed until mid-1945. Capel then ferried Canadian troops back to Canada for several months before she became a training ship. She was placed in reserve in mid-1946 and was sold for scrap at the end of 1947. Description: the F-class ships were repeats of the preceding E-class. They displaced 1,405 long tons at standard load and 1,940 long tons at deep load. The ships had an overall length of 329 feet, a beam of 33 feet 3 inches and a draft of 12 feet 6 inches. They were powered by 2 Brown Curtis-geared steam turbines, each driving 1 propeller shaft, using steam provided by 3 Admiralty 3-drum boilers. The turbines developed a total of 36,000 shaft horsepower and gave a maximum speed of 35.5 knots. Foxhound barely exceeded her design speed during her sea trials. She carried a maximum of 470 long tons of fuel oil that gave her range of 6,350 nautical miles at 15 knots. The ship's complement was 145 officers and ratings. The ships mounted 4 4.7-inch Mark 9 guns in single mounts designated A, B, X, and Y in sequence from front to rear. For anti-aircraft defense, they had 2 quadruple mounts for the 0.5-inch Vickers Mark III machine gun. The F-class was fitted with 2 above-water quadruple torpedo tube mounts for 21-inch torpedoes. 1 depth charge rack and 2 throwers were fitted. 20 depth charges were originally carried, but this increased to 35 shortly after the Second World War began. Wartime modifications. By October 1940, Foxhound had her rear torpedo tube mount replaced by a 12-pounder AA gun. While the ship was under repair in late 1941, her existing direct control tower and rangefinder above the bridge was replaced by a new director with a Type 285 gunnery radar mounted on its roof. These fed target data to the new fuse-keeping clock, an analog fire control system that calculated the gunnery information for the guns. The ship also received a HF-DF radio direction finder at the top of her foremast. Her short-range AA armament was augmented by two 20mm Helicon guns on the wings of the ship's bridge, a pair on the enlarged searchlight platform, and probably another pair were added on the quarterdeck. When she was converted into an escort destroyer in late 1943, B gun was replaced by a Hedgehog anti-submarine spigot mortar, and stowage was increased for a total of 70 depth charges, which meant that Y gun and the 12-pounder AA gun had to be removed to compensate for the weight. A Type 271 target indication radar replaced the Director. It is likely that the Vickers guns were replaced by the Helicons from the quarterdeck at this time. Construction in Korea. Foxhound, the seventh ship of that name in the Royal Navy, was laid down by John Brown and Amp Company at their Clydebank shipyard on 15 August 1933. She was launched on 12 October 1934 and completed on 21 June 1935. The ship cost £247,234, excluding government-furnished equipment like the armament. Foxhound was initially assigned to the 6th Destroyer Flotilla of the Home Fleet, but often detached to the Mediterranean Fleet to enforce the arms embargo imposed on both sides in the Spanish Civil War by the Non-Intervention Committee. Between November 1936 and 13 February 1937, the ship was based in Gibraltar except for a brief refit at Sheerness Dockyard in January. She patrolled the Spanish ports on the Bay of Biscay in May to June and August-October before returning home for a refit at Chatham Dockyard from 27 October to 30 December. Foxhound then returned to the Mediterranean to patrol the area between Gibraltar and Oran, French Algeria from January to March 1938. On the 22nd of September, the ship collided with the submarine Seahorse, damaging one of her propellers. She was repaired at Sheerness from the 10th of November to the 12th of December. Foxhound remained in home waters for the rest of 1938-39. The 6th DF was renumbered the 8th Destroyer Flotilla in April 1939, 5 months before the start of World War II. In September 1939, Foxhound was assigned to the Home Fleet and based at Scapa Flow. In the first month of hostilities, she was part of an anti-submarine hunting group centered on the aircraft carrier Ark Royal. On the 14th of September, the carrier was unsuccessfully attacked by the German submarine U-39. Foxhound, in company with her sisters Faulkner and Firedrake, counter-attacked and sank U-39 northwest of Ireland. In February 1940, she was one of the escorts for convoy TC-3 carrying troops from Canada to the UK. Later that month, the ship rescued the survivors of the torpedoed freighter SS Urania on the 11th of February. During the Second Battle of Narvik, Foxhound and the destroyers Icarus and Hero streamed the TSDS minesweeping gear in advance of the battleship Warspite and her escort as they steamed up the Vestfjord to engage the remaining German destroyers on the 13th of April. The ship and 4 other British destroyers pursued the remaining German ships into the Rombaksfjorden, east of Narvik, where the lack of ammunition had forced the German ships to retreat. During the battle, Foxhound rescued 2 officers and 9 ratings from the destroyer Z-12 Erik Gies. During May, she escorted troop convoys to Iceland as they occupied the island. In early June, the ship was escorting the battlecruiser Repulse and 2 cruisers as they searched for illusory German commerce raiders off Iceland. They were recalled to Norwegian waters on the 9th of June after the Germans launched Operation Juno, an attack on the Allied convoys evacuating Norway, but the Germans had already returned to base by the time the ships arrived. Later, Foxhound escorted Ark Royal and a battlecruiser Hood, together with her sisters Faulkner and Fearless, and the destroyer Escapade, from Scapa Flow to Gibraltar, where they would form Force H. On the morning of the 3rd of July, she ferried Captain Cedric Holland, the emissary of Admiral James Somerville, commander of Force H, to meet with Admiral Marcel Bruno Gensoul, commander of the Vichy French forces at Mers-el-Kébir, Algeria. Holland was to deliver an ultimatum regarding the disposition of the French ships to ensure that they could not fall into the hands of the Germans. Gensoul initially refused to meet with such a low-ranking envoy, but later relented and negotiations were underway that afternoon to disarm the French ships in place when the British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, ordered the talks terminated to forestall the impending arrival of French reinforcements. The British opened fire a half-hour later, including Foxhound. A month later, the ship escorted Force H during Operation Hurry, a mission to fly off fighter aircraft for Malta and conduct an airstrike on Cagliari on the 2nd of August. Shortly afterwards, she escorted Hood back home and began a refit at Sheerness that lasted until October. Foxhound then returned to Gibraltar and escorted the aircraft carriers Argus and Ark Royal during Operations Coat and White in November. In between sorties into the Mediterranean, the ship escorted convoys between Gibraltar and West Africa. In early January 1941, she was involved in Operation Excess. On the 31st of January, Force H, including Foxhound, departed Gibraltar to carry out Operation Picket, an unsuccessful night torpedo attack by 8 of Ark Royal's ferry Swordfish on the Tirso Dam in Sardinia. The British ships returned to Gibraltar on the 4th of February and began preparing for Operation Grog, a naval bombardment of Genoa, that was successfully carried out 5 days later. On the 7th of April, Foxhound was escorting convoy WS-7 off the coast of Sierra Leone, West Africa, when she rescued 3 seamen. They were survivors from the cargo liner Sumona, which had been sunk a week earlier. In mid-May, she participated in Operation Splice, another mission in which the carriers Ark Royal and Furious flew off fighters for Malta. Force H was ordered to join the escort of convoy WS-8B in the North Atlantic on the 24th of May, a day after the Battle of the Denmark Strait, but they were directed to search from the German battleship Bismarck and the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen on the 25th. Heavy seas increased fuel consumption for all of the escorts, and Foxhound was forced to return to Gibraltar to refuel later the day before rejoining the capital ships of Force H on the 29th. After Bismarck had been tracked down and sunk, the destroyer screamed another flying-off mission to Malta on the 14th of June, 2 days later, after German blockade runners reached France. Force H sorted into the Atlantic on a failed search for more blockade runners. Together with her sisters Faulkner, Fearless, Forrester and Foresight, Foxhound helped to sink the German submarine U-138 on the 18th of June. 4 days later, the 8th DF was tasked to intercept a German supply ship spotted heading towards the French coast. The next day they intercepted MS Ulsterter, which was scuttled by her crew upon the approach of the British ships. They rescued 78 British POWs taken from ships sunk by German raiders and the crew. In late June, Foxhound screened Ark Royal and Furious as they flew off more fighters for Malta in Operation Railway. During Operation Substance, Firedrake and Foxhound were each leading a column of the convoy, streaming the TSDS minesweeps through the Sicilian Narrows on the 23rd of July when an Italian bomb near missed Firedrake and disabled her so that she had to be towed back to Gibraltar. The bulk of the convoy reached Malta the next day before the escorts rejoined Force H. A week later she screened the capital ships of Force H as they covered another Malta convoy. Foxhound returned to the UK in August for a refit that lasted until November. The ship was briefly assigned to escort Group EG-3 in the North Atlantic for convoy escort duties later that month until she was transferred to the Mediterranean Fleet in late December. Foxhound screened the light cruisers of Force B and the freighter Glengyle of convoy MF2 from Alexandria, Egypt, to Malta in early January 1942. A week later, she escorted the cruisers covering convoy MF3 to Malta and was detached to escort the freighter MV Thermopylae to Benghazi, Libya, after she developed engine trouble on the 18th of January. En route the freighter was sunk by German aircraft and Foxhound arrived back at Alexandria on the 20th of January. By the 29th of March, the ship had been transferred to the Eastern Fleet and was assigned to the fast ships of Force A as Somerville organized his forces in anticipation of the Japanese invasion of the Indian Ocean. Shortly afterwards she was transferred to South Africa and the 2nd Destroyer Flotilla to escort convoys. Foxhound was then transferred to 4th Destroyer Flotilla at Freetown, Sierra Leone, in May to July 1943. Foxhound was converted to an escort destroyer from August 1943 and she was transferred to Canada on completion on 8 February 1944. The ship was commissioned into the Royal Canadian Navy that same day as HMS Capel. After working up at the anti-submarine training school at Tobermory on the Isle of Mull, she was assigned to the Western Approaches Command. Initially Capel was a part of the 6th Escort Group based at Londonderry Port, but she was transferred to the 12th Escort Group in May where she later patrolled the western entrance to the English Channel after the Normandy landings to protect shipping from German attacks. Together with the destroyers Saskatchewan, Skeena, and Restigouche, Capel attacked 3 German patrol boats off Brest on the night of 5 to 6 July, with the German patrol boat V715 being sunk and Capel lightly damaged. On the 11th of August, the ship Restigouche, Skeena, and the destroyer Assiniboine intercepted a small convoy south of Brest. While they sank 2 naval trawlers, Capel was accidentally rammed by Skeena during the engagement and was under repair until the 5th of September. The following month she joined the 11th Escort Group for patrols off Iceland until the end of November. The ship arrived at Halifax on the 29th of November to begin a refit at Pictou, Nova Scotia, that lasted from the 5th of December to the 30th of June 1945. Capel made 4 trips to the UK to ferry Canadian troops back to Canada by the 25th of September. The ship then became a stationary training ship for the torpedo school at Halifax. She was placed in reserve on the 27th of May 1946 and then sold to German and Milne for scrap in December 1947. Citations. Bibliography. Admiralty Historical Section. The Royal Navy and the Mediterranean. Whitehall Histories. Naval Staff Histories. Volume 2, November 1940 – December 1941. London, Whitehall History in association with Frank Cass. ISBN 0-7146-52059. College, J. J. Warlow, Ben. Ships of the Royal Navy. The complete record of all fighting ships of the Royal Navy. London, Chatham Publishing. ISBN 9781861762818. OCLC 67,375,475. English, John. Amazon to Ivanhoe. British Standard Destroyers of the 1930s. Kendal, England. World Ship Society. ISBN 0-905617-649. Friedman, Norman. British Destroyers from Earliest Days to the Second World War. Annapolis, Maryland. Naval Institute Press. ISBN 978-1-591140-818. Hark, I.H. The Battle for Norway, April to June 1940. Barnsley, UK. Seaforth Publishing. ISBN 9781848320574. Hark, I.H. The German Invasion of Norway, April 1940. Annapolis, Maryland. Naval Institute Press. ISBN 978-1-59114323-9. Lastly, Philippe. Could Admiral Gensoul have averted the tragedy of Mers-el-Kébir? Journal of Military History. 67, 835-44. DOI 10.1353 JMH 2003.0234 via Project Muse. Lenton, H.T. British NAMP Empire Warships of the Second World War. Annapolis, Maryland. Naval Institute Press. ISBN 1-55750-0487. McPherson, Ken and Amp Barry, Ron. The Ships of Canada's Naval Forces 1910-2002. St. Catharines, Ontario. Vanwell. ISBN 1-55125-0721. March, Edgar J. British Destroyers. A History of Development 1892-1953, drawn by Admiralty permission from official records and AMP returns, ships covers and AMP building plans. London, Sealy Service. OCLC 164,893,555. Rowe, Jürgen. Chronology of the War at Sea 1939-1945, The Naval History of World War II. Annapolis, Maryland. Naval Institute Press. ISBN 1-591141192. Smith, Peter C. Destroyer Leader, The Story of HMS Faulkner 1935-46. Barnsley, South Yorkshire, UK. Pen and Amp, Sword Maritime. ISBN 1-8441512112. Whitley, M.J. Destroyers of World War II. An International Encyclopedia. Annapolis, Maryland. Naval Institute Press. ISBN 08702132661.